ExamPrep.School. Texas Adjuster Property and Casualty Insurance Exam. Exam code INSTX-PCA81. There are 4 practice exams in this series. This video covers Practice Exam 1. The first 20 questions are free. In this video, we will be covering the following major categories for Practice Exam 1. General Property and Casualty Product Knowledge. Insurance terms and related concepts. Texas statutes and rules. Pertinent to P&C adjusting. Let's walk through the format. I'll read each question and its choices. Let's get started. Question 1. Under the standard fire policy, the insuring agreement obligates the insurer to indemnify the insured for direct physical loss caused by which of the following perils? A. Fire, lightning, and explosion. B. Fire and lightning. C. Fire, lightning, and windstorm. D. Fire, lightning, and riot. A countdown circle appears in the top right. Once it completes, the answer is revealed. You can pause at any time if you'd like longer to think. If you'd like additional practice covering more topics, see the description for our book. The correct answer is B. The insuring agreement in a standard fire policy covers only losses from fire and lightning, as stated in the printed policy, excluding other causes unless amended by endorsement. Reason A is not correct. Explosion is not covered under the standard insuring agreement unless specifically added by endorsement. Reason C is not correct. Windstorm is not included in the basic fire and lightning insuring agreement. Reason D is not correct. Riot is not a peril covered by the fire policy's insuring agreement. Question 2. What is the significance of the numbered 165 lines in a standard fire policy? A. They delineate policy provisions to ensure no unauthorized alterations. B. They set the maximum number of pages in the policy. C. They indicate the policy's effective date and expiration date. D. They enumerate covered perils under the policy. The correct answer is A. The 165 numbered lines in the standard fire policy serve to identify the text verbatim. Any interlineation or deletion within those lines invalidates the contract, preventing unauthorized changes. Reason B is not correct. The numbered lines do not define page limits, but rather identify text content. Reason C is not correct. Effective and expiration dates are specified elsewhere, not by line numbers. Reason D is not correct. Covered perils are defined in the insuring agreement, not by line numbering. Question 3. Under the appraisal condition of the standard fire policy, if the 2 appointed appraisers are unable to agree on an umpire, how is an umpire selected? A. The insurer selects the umpire. B. A court of competent jurisdiction appoints the umpire. C. A mutually agreed third party is selected by the appraisers. D. The insured selects the umpire. The correct answer is C. If the 2 appraisers cannot agree on an umpire, the appraisal clause stipulates that they shall select a mutually agreed third party to serve as umpire, with either party able to petition a court if agreement fails. Reason A is not correct. The insurer does not unilaterally appoint the umpire under the appraisal condition. Reason B is not correct. Court appointment is only invoked if appraisers cannot agree on an umpire selection. Reason D is not correct. The insured does not have exclusive authority to choose the umpire. Question 4. A commercial building has been vacant for more than 60 consecutive days when a fire occurs. Under the vacancy clause of the standard fire policy, which one of the following losses would most likely be denied? A. Fire damage from a lightning strike. B. Glass breakage caused by a severe storm. C. Water damage from a leaking pipe. D. Vandalism damage by trespassers. The correct answer is D. The correct answer is vandalism damage because the vacancy clause in the standard fire policy suspends coverage for vandalism, theft, and certain water damage when a building has been vacant beyond the specified period. Reason A is not correct. Fire damage from lightning remains covered even if the building is vacant because fire perils are still insured under the policy. Reason B is not correct. Glass breakage due to storm is still covered since the vacancy clause specifically suspends only certain non-fire perils like vandalism, not storm damage. Reason C is not correct. Water damage from a leaking pipe would be denied only if it results from malicious action, not merely because of vacancy. Question 5. Following a fire loss, the insurer has not requested a proof of loss form. Under the standard fire policy, by when must the insured submit the proof of loss to the insurer? A. Within 90 days after the loss. B. Within 30 days after the loss. C. Within 60 days after the loss. D. Within 120 days after the loss. The correct answer is C. The correct answer is within 60 days after the loss because the standard fire policy requires submission of proof of loss within 60 days if the insurer does not request a form sooner. Reason A is not correct. A 90-day deadline exceeds the policy's maximum 60-day period for submitting proof of loss. Reason B is not correct. A 30-day deadline is too short. The policy specifies 60 days when no form is requested. Reason D is not correct. A 120-day period is not provided by the standard fire policy's proof of loss provisions. Question 6. An insured fails to submit a required proof of loss under the standard fire policy, and the mortgagee steps in to protect its interest under the mortgage clause. Within what period must the mortgagee furnish proof of loss to the insurer? A. Within 60 days after the insurer notifies the mortgagee of the insured's default. B. Within 30 days after the mortgagee learns of the insured's failure. C. Within 90 days after the loss. D. Within 1 year after the loss. The correct answer is A. The correct answer is within 60 days after the insurer notifies the mortgagee, because the mortgage clause grants the mortgagee that period to furnish proof of loss if the insured fails to do so. Reason B is not correct. A 30-day period is shorter than the 60 days allowed under the mortgage clause for proof of loss submission. Reason C is not correct. A 90-day period is not included in the mortgage clause's specified time frame. Reason D is not correct. A 1-year period exceeds the policy's 60-day requirement for mortgagee-provided proof of loss. Question 7. An insurer issues a cancellation notice for underwriting reasons on a standard fire policy, effective 60 days after the policy's inception. How many days advance written notice must the insurer provide to the insured? A. 10 days. B. 15 days. C. 30 days. D. 60 days. The correct answer is C. The correct answer is 30 days because the standard fire policy requires at least 30 days written notice for cancellation for any reason other than non-payment of premium. Reason A is not correct. A 10-day notice applies only to cancellations for non-payment, not underwriting reasons. Reason B is not correct. A 15-day period is not specified in the standard fire policy for any cancellation clause. Reason D is not correct. A 60-day notice exceeds the policy's required notice period for cancellation. Question 8. An insured has an extended coverage endorsement added to their fire policy. Which one of the following perils is not included under the endorsement? A. Hail. B. Riot. C. Volcanic eruption. D. Flood. The correct answer is D. The correct answer is flood, because the extended coverage endorsement adds perils such as windstorm, hail, riot, explosion, and volcanic eruption, but excludes flood and earth movement. Reason A is not correct. Hail is one of the perils specifically included under the extended coverage endorsement. Reason B is not correct. Riot is covered by the extended coverage endorsement as part of civil commotion. Reason C is not correct. Volcanic eruption is explicitly listed as a covered peril under the endorsement. Question 9. Under the Personal Auto Policy's Part A Liability Insuring Agreement, the insurer agrees to which of the following? A. Provide defense and investigation for covered claims without additional charge. B. Reimburse the insured for bail bond premiums up to a specified limit. C. Pay all sums that a covered person legally must pay as damages for bodily injury or property damage. D. Cover medical expenses incurred by the insured for auto-related injuries. The correct answer is C. The correct answer is that the insurer agrees to pay all sums a covered person is legally obligated to pay for bodily injury or property damage under the insuring agreement, which is the core promise of Part A liability. Reason A is not correct. This describes a supplementary payment rather than the primary obligation to pay damages under the insuring agreement. Reason B is not correct. Reimbursement of bail bond premiums is a supplementary payment, not the primary liability payment obligation. Reason D is not correct. Medical expense coverage is provided under Part B, not the Part A liability insuring agreement. Question 10. In Texas, the mandatory split liability limits denoted as 30, 60 divided by 25 correspond to which coverage amounts? A. $30,000 bodily injury per person, $60,000 property damage per accident, $25,000 bodily injury per accident. B. $30,000 bodily injury per accident, $60,000 bodily injury per person, $25,000 property damage per accident. C. $30,000 property damage per accident, $60,000 bodily injury per person, $25,000 bodily injury per accident. D. $30,000 bodily injury per person, $60,000 bodily injury per accident, $25,000 property damage per accident. The correct answer is D. The correct answer is the standard Texas split limits of $30,000 BI per person, $60,000 BI per accident, and $25,000 PD per accident as required by state law. Reason A is not correct. It incorrectly assigns the $60,000 limit to PD instead of BI per accident and misplaces the $25,000 BI limit. Reason B is not correct. This swaps the per person and per accident BI amounts, which is incorrect. Reason C is not correct. It misassigns the PD amount and bodily injury amounts incorrectly. Question 11. A combined single limit. CSL auto liability policy provides which of the following coverage structures? A. Separate dollar limits for bodily injury per person, bodily injury per accident, and property damage per accident. B. Split limits for bodily injury only and a separate limit for property damage. C. One overall maximum limit that applies to all bodily injury and property damage per accident. D. A per person limit for bodily injury and a per vehicle limit for property damage. The correct answer is C. The correct answer describes a combined single limit, which sets one maximum payment per accident for both bodily injury and property damage rather than separate sublimits. Reason A is not correct. This answer describes split limits, not a combined single limit. Reason B is not correct. There is no common structure that splits BI only while separately limiting PD under a policy labeled CSL. Reason D is not correct. This mixes per person and per vehicle limits, which does not reflect a combined single limit. Question 12. Under the personal auto policy's Part A liability coverage, the term insured includes which one of the following persons? Assume all individuals are properly licensed. A. A person using the named insured's covered auto without permission. B. A person using the named insured's covered auto with permission for personal use. C. A person using a covered auto for business deliveries. D. A person loading property into a non-owned auto. The correct answer is B. The correct answer is that anyone using a covered auto with permission is an insured under the liability coverage. Usage without permission, business use exclusions, and non-owned autoloading fall outside that definition. Reason A is not correct. Unauthorized use is not covered because permission is required for insured status. Reason C is not correct. Business use is excluded under standard personal auto liability coverage. Reason D is not correct. Liability for loading a non-owned auto is not covered unless the auto itself is a covered auto. Question 13. A pizza delivery driver uses their personal vehicle insured under a Texas personal auto policy to make deliveries and is involved in a collision causing property damage and bodily injury. Which exclusion in the policy would most likely bar liability coverage for this loss? A. Workers' compensation exclusion. B. Electronic data exclusion. C. Business pursuits exclusion. D. Pollution exclusion. The correct answer is C. The policy's business pursuits exclusion removes coverage for liabilities arising from the use of a vehicle in any business or professional activity, such as pizza delivery. Reason A is not correct. This exclusion applies to employer liability under workers' compensation laws, not delivery-related auto liability. Reason B is not correct. This exclusion addresses loss or damage to electronic data, which is unrelated to auto liability exposures. Reason D is not correct. The pollution exclusion removes coverage for environmental contamination, not business use activities. Question 14. A Texas motorist insured under a standard personal auto policy travels to New Mexico for a business conference and, after 18 days, is involved in an at-fault accident. Under the policy's out-of-state coverage extension, how is liability coverage applied? A. Full liability coverage provided for a limited period. B. No coverage beyond state boundaries. C. Liability only if a premium surcharge is paid. D. Basic liability coverage limited to the state minimums. The correct answer is A. The out-of-state coverage extension automatically provides full liability coverage for a specified number of days when an insured vehicle is driven outside the policy state. Reason B is not correct. Coverage is not halted at state lines. The extension allows travel beyond the home state. Reason C is not correct. No surcharge is required for the temporary extension. It applies automatically. Reason D is not correct. Coverage does not drop to state minimum limits under the extension. Full policy limits apply. Question 15. A Texas driver is involved in an at-fault accident and fails to maintain the required proof of financial responsibility under the Texas Motor Vehicle Safety Responsibility Act. Which penalty is most likely imposed under the Act? A. Imposition of a mandatory jail sentence. B. Suspension of vehicle registration. C. Imposition of a financial institution lien. D. Suspension of driver's license. The correct answer is D. Under the Act, failure to maintain required security after an accident typically results in suspension of the driver's license until proof of financial responsibility is filed. Reason A is not correct. The Act does not impose mandatory jail sentences for failure to file proof of financial responsibility. Reason B is not correct. While vehicle registration may be affected, the primary penalty is suspension of the driver's license. Reason C is not correct. The Act does not create a lien by a financial institution for this violation. Question 16. An adult child, a full-time college student, lives at home with parents during summer and uses the family's insured vehicle to run errands. Under the personal auto policy's definitions, How is this individual classified when operating the vehicle? A. Resident relative. B. Spouse of named insured. C. Named insured. D. Occasional driver. The correct answer is A. A full-time student dependent residing with the named insured is classified as a resident relative, extending coverage to that individual under the policy. Reason B is not correct. Coverage for a spouse is separate. This individual is a child dependent, not a spouse. Reason C is not correct. Only those explicitly named on the policy declarations are classified as named insureds. Reason D is not correct. An occasional driver lacks the residency status required for this classification. Question 17. A consultant routinely rents vehicles in her own name for business travel and is involved in an accident in one of these rentals. Which coverage under her personal auto policy will respond to liability claims from this incident? A. Hired auto liability coverage. B. Temporary substitute auto coverage. C. Newly acquired auto coverage. D. Non-owned auto liability coverage. The correct answer is D. Non-owned auto liability coverage applies to vehicles used by the insured that are neither owned nor leased, but are used on behalf of the named insured. Reason A is not correct. Hired auto liability covers autos leased or hired under a written agreement, not those rented in the individual's name without a specific endorsement. Reason B is not correct. Temporary substitute auto coverage applies to vehicles temporarily substituting for a covered auto, not routine rentals. Reason C is not correct. Newly acquired auto coverage extends to vehicles the insured acquires ownership of, not rented vehicles. Question 18. An insured's vehicle is in for extensive mechanical repairs, so they rent a car from the repair shop for 2 days and are involved in an at-fault accident. Under the personal auto policy, how is the rental car classified? A. Temporary substitute auto. B. Hired auto. C. Non-owned auto. D. Commercial auto. The correct answer is A. A rental car used while a covered auto is temporarily unavailable for repairs qualifies as a temporary substitute auto under the policy. Reason B is not correct. Hired auto refers to vehicles leased or hired under a written agreement for which separate coverage may be required. Reason C is not correct. Non-owned auto covers vehicles the insured uses but neither owns nor hires. Temporary substitute is more specific here. Reason D is not correct. Commercial auto designations relate to business auto policies, not a temporary replacement vehicle. Question 19. Under a standard H03 homeowners policy, the limit for coverage A, dwelling, is best described as A. The estimated replacement cost determined by the insurer at policy issuance. B. The amount shown in the declarations for a dwelling coverage. C. 80% of the dwelling's current market value. D. The assessed value assigned by local tax authorities. The correct answer is B. The limit for coverage A is the specified dollar amount listed in the declarations, representing the maximum the insurer will pay for dwelling damage from covered perils as defined under the policy. Reason A is not correct. Replacement cost estimate by the insurer is used for underwriting, not to set the declared policy limit. Reason C is not correct. The 80% figure relates to coinsurance requirements, not the declared policy limit for dwelling. Reason D is not correct. Local tax assessments are unrelated to the insurer's declared dwelling coverage limit. Question 20. Which of the following accurately describes the basis of peril coverage under an H05 homeowners policy? A. Only dwelling coverage is on an open perils basis, while personal property remains named perils. B. Both dwelling and personal property coverages are written on an open perils basis. C. Only personal property is on an open perils basis, with dwelling insured on named perils. D. Liability and medical payments coverages are likewise on an open perils basis. The correct answer is B. In an HO5 policy, both coverage A, dwelling, and coverage C, personal property, are insured on an open perils basis, meaning all risks are covered unless specifically excluded by the policy language. Reason A is not correct. Designating only dwelling as open perils ignores that personal property is also insured on an open perils basis under HO5. Reason C is not correct. This reverses the policy structure because dwelling is also insured on an open perils basis, not only personal property. Reason D is not correct. Liability and medical payments are not property coverages and do not follow an open perils structure. Enjoyed this practice test? Tap like, hit subscribe, and share it with a classmate. Got a question we should tweak? Comment below, we read them all. Find full practice exam books in the description or at ExamPrep.School.